Hi there, and welcome to the first episode of our brand new series, the Procurement Power Play, Maximising Value in 15 minutes, where we are going to be discussing a variety of different procurement subjects and supporting techniques in which, you guessed it, inside 15 minutes. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing the relationship spectrum as part of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply qualification. As a result, those of you watching this that have undertaken the qualification, this technique will be instantly recognisable to you. Before we discuss any of that, however, it's probably worth us taking a step back in time and gaining a better understanding of the evolution of the procurement profession and why, in fact, supplier relationships are so crucial to the success across the sectors in today's business environment. The evolution from purchasing to procurement reflects a significant transformation as how organisations acquire goods, works and services. A fun fact for you. Did you know that the first ever recorded business-related purchasing activity dates back to ancient Egypt, around 3000 BC, where scribes responsible for pyramid design also functioned as clerks, using papyrus to record the amount of labour and materials needed for construction. As I've just said, this is the earliest ever recorded form of purchasing activity. It involved meticulous record keeping and management of resources, laying the groundwork for modern procurement practices to follow. When you stop and think about that for a moment, this suggests even the ancient Egyptians were afraid of auditors. Granted, slightly different world to the world of e-commerce that we actually live in today. When you think about the evolution of purchasing to procurement, those manual processes dating back to ancient Egypt weren't too dissimilar right up until the advent of IT within the workplace, and for that very reason, purchasing activity focused on acquiring goods, works and services on an as and when basis. This often involved simple transactions and basic record keeping. This, of course, was a reactive approach where the primary objective of organisations was to meet immediate needs, with little emphasis on long-term planning or, in fact, strategic sourcing. As we moved into the mid to the latter part of the 20th century, businesses began to establish dedicated purchasing departments. These departments were responsible for negotiating contracts and managing suppliers. We also started to see the introduction of standardized procedures and governance, with documentation helping to streamline purchasing processes and improve efficiency. The development of electronic data interchange in the 1970s allowed for the electronic transition of procurement documents. Then, we of course, a couple of decades later, had the small matter of the introduction of the internet that changed the landscape of business engagements in general forever. From my own experience, it wasn't until the early 2000s that we saw the advent and mindset of strategic sourcing. As a result, procurement evolved from a transactional role to that of a strategic one. As a result, organisations began to focus on long-term supplier relationships, cost savings, as well as value creation. Modern procurement practices are heavily reliant upon the use of e-procurement platforms, which have revolutionised procurement, making it more efficient and transparent. As we know, these systems automate often time-consuming tasks, improve data accuracy, and enhance supplier collaboration. In our podcasts, Fleur and myself often discuss sustainability and ethics, which are particularly more prevalent with the launch of the Procurement Act. As such, modern procurement has a heavier focus on ethical sourcing, sustainability, and of course, social responsibility. The first step in actively managing supplier relationships is to classify the relationships you currently have in place. That classification can be done by using the relationship spectrum. So up on screen is the relationship spectrum and the 9 approaches within it. Relationships are crucial in procurement for a variety of reasons. Many of you will be fully aware that one of the main benefits of adopting suitable relationships with your suppliers will assist in striving towards enhanced collaboration and innovative solutions offered by your suppliers, particularly those that you categorize within the right-hand side of the spectrum. Adopting the correct supplier relationships based on the procured subject matter in question and how important that item or service is to your end users is vital. Should you wish to ensure a competitive advantage, of course, not all buyer and supplier relationships require the adoption of one of the approaches as shown on the right-hand side of the spectrum. We'll look into the justification behind that thought process as we run through each one of them. Ultimately, as procurement professionals, strong supplier relationships require an investment of both time and resource. However, as they cultivate these relationships, they provide a better position to respond to market changes and have enhanced ability to develop innovative solutions and deliver greater value. So, as mentioned, there are 9 approaches identified within the spectrum. We'll move from left to right, focusing on the adversarial approaches first. Our little history overview of the evolution of purchasing to procurement informs us that these first few approaches certainly fit within the purchasing mindset and timeline. Starting off with the adversarial approach, naturally, this is best aligned to a scenario where price is much more important than maintaining a long-term working relationship. Like many early approaches shown on screen, these would be typically used for non-core products or services that do not offer significant value to either you as a procuring organisation or, in fact, your customers. Typical common behaviours here would be lack of communication, short-term deals, and a lack of trust. Moving on to the arm's length approach. This would be one best utilised where the supplier is used infrequently and the contracted periods between the two organisations would certainly be short term. There is no time to consider mutual benefits in this approach as the two will act independently from one another. This approach would fit well for low-level construction trades and materials as an example. The third approach is transactional, and in this instance, the volume and placement of orders with suppliers are higher than the previous 2 approaches described. But still, the low value and risk associated with these items and services would remain. The go-to items, like basic consumer electronics, are commonly referred to in this instance where differentiation is minimal and suppliers are easily interchangeable, given the fact that the marketplace is highly competitive, which would also be said for the arm's length and adversarial approaches previously discussed. We're now starting to move towards the middle section of the spectrum as we take a look at closer tactical. This is an approach best adopted in a scenario where a competent supplier is necessary, and that competent supplier will help to coordinate the activities of other suppliers within a tiered supply chain. The approach will require more frequent communication and a higher level of collaboration compared with any other approach we've looked at up to this point. Thinking about what I mentioned in relation to supplier tiering and the closer tactical approach, the appointed supplier being at the top of that chain, this will again lend itself well to project-based engagements where both parties work closely to achieve specific goals. Hot on the heels of closer tactical is single sourced. This approach does exactly what it says on the tin, which is the appointment of an exclusive supplier. This exclusivity of supply will often provide volume discounts and or higher quality supplier outcomes through the adoption of this eggs in one basket approach. Naturally, this comes with associated risks, particularly in the current economic climate. And because of that, this approach requires a high level of trust in order to be a success. So, we're now in the realms of the collaborative end of the relationship spectrum. And we start off that by looking at the strategic alliance approach. In this scenario and instance, where two or more suppliers will join together to deliver a joint offering, the real drive for suppliers and buying organisations here is that there will be clearly identified mutual benefits in collaborating through this approach, and those benefits will be quickly realised as a result of resources becoming between the organisations shared, and they will seek to achieve a win-win outcome. The approach is commonplace in a design and subsequently build procurement requirement and contract. We now move on to the more widely recognised approach identified within the relationship spectrum, and that approach is outsourced. Now, of course, these services are ones that would be typically carried out in-house, but then latterly determined that they would be better off both financially and operationally transferred to an outside supplier or contractor. As I've just suggested, these activities naturally don't add any great value to the buying organisation. And by losing that skill set as part of the transition to an externally appointed supplier, in this instance, the outsourced provider. By the same token, these outsourced activities would not form part of the buying organisation's unique selling point. The ability to outsource such activities allow buying organisations to focus on core requirements that truly add value and allow them to differentiate from their competitors. Here in the UK, of course, outsourced activities and subsequent proposals to transfer are regulated via the Transfer of Undertakings Protection of Employment, or 2P for short. We're almost there now with our review of the relationship spectrum as we look at the partnership approach. Naturally, these are instances where there is a high risk associated to the procurement activity and the subsequent contracts. This is because in this scenario, the market is hugely limited when it comes to sources of supply and availability of suppliers. In order for this approach to be a success from both sides of the buying and supplying organisations, this needs to be assured by way of commitment. This commitment is then embedded within the culture of these organisations as it cascades throughout each. It goes without saying, management, resource, time and effort exercised on this relationship approach will need to be equal for both organisations. Finally, and what is defined to be the most collaborative approach within the relationship spectrum, co-destiny. It requires mutual dependence as both buying organisations and supplier are highly interdependent, sharing risks and rewards. They succeed or fail together, with pain-gain share mechanisms being commonplace. Absolute trust is needed with transparency between the organisations, with open sharing of information and resources. These aren't 6-week contracts. These require long-term commitments. Built for the long term, often involving strategic planning and joint ventures. There is extensive collaboration in all aspects of the business, from product development to market strategies is needed in order to be a success. For that very reason, complex, long-term, high value, innovative, first of their kind requirements are best sat in the pocket of this relationship approach. So that's it. Our review of the relationship spectrum. And to summarize, something we already know, in that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to adopting a suitable relationship with your suppliers. It's based on a vast number of variables. What is important, however, is the necessity to understand the reason behind this requirement itself to your organization and your customers, and then mapping it out accordingly based on the market conditions that the suppliers sit within. Only then can you truly determine the optimal relationship approach to take. I hope you've enjoyed our first episode. Let us know what you think and, in fact, what you would like Fleur and I to cover in future videos. If you found it of interest, give it a like and, of course, subscribe to our channel, as it will help us continue to grow and produce content for it. And we'll see you next time.